turn on notifications and never miss the beginning of a new story again. Join us and be part of every chapter. From primordial clay, from matter that dreamed of form, Arim emerged, enveloped in the raw aura of the first breath of Ayel, the world shaper. His existence was a newborn miracle, and for that very reason, a manifest vulnerability. Arim walked under a sky still in definition, and the vastness of the incomplete earth echoed the solitude of his newly formed heart. Although the breath that gave him life carried the memory of the stars and the promise of the sublime, his body was only damp clay, too soft for the harshness of the future. The injustice of his initial condition lay in this, to be the highest aspiration of creation and, at the same time, its most fragile part, a beacon of life, defenseless in the ancestral darkness. The aeon of his dawn was also the season of his first and deepest trial, for the gift of life came accompanied by the burden of being tested. He felt like the target of a cold gaze, peering from the cracks of reality, a silent omen that peace was a state yet to be, conquered with the iron fist of faith. While the man of clay tried to comprehend the symphony of textures and sounds of the world around him, Karun, the guardian of shadows, observed him with a cold and calculating revulsion. To Karun, Arim's appearance was an insolence, a reckless imbalance in the perfectly ordered cosmos of stillness. Arim's fragility inspired not pity, but contempt and the certainty of imminent collapse. How can the divine breath dwell in such a fleeting form? Thundered. Karun's thought in the depths where light dared not reach. His motivation was the preservation of a stony order. He saw in Arim the vector of chaos, the error that should be corrected and returned to dust. Thus, he began to weave the webs of his treachery, a plot of doubts and fears destined to corrode Arim's confidence in the goodness of his origin. Karun's malice was not vulgar hatred, but a philosophical conviction that life, especially that born from the imperfection of clay, was unworthy of the gift of eternity. The abandonment seemed total. Although he knew Ayel was the source of everything, the creator remained in a plane of silent observation, allowing the ordeal to manifest. Arim, in his newfound naivete, sought the touch of the hand that had molded him, but found only the cold wind that foretold change. In that oppressive solitude, only Nalu, the spirit of the waters, dared to approach, whispering secrets of resilience and fluidity. However, Nalu's comfort could not dispel the weight of the world that Karun imposed upon him. Shadows began to take shape in the nocturnal landscapes of his mind, and Arim felt the weight of being the only one of his kind, the isolated link between divinity and nothingness. His heart, still in a stage of learning, experienced the first piercing pain of doubt. If I am so loved, why am I so exposed to the cold of helplessness? This was spiritual humiliation, to feel unprotected, even while carrying the spark of the divine. Karun's attack was not with fire or sword, but with the most cruel subtlety, the manipulation of memory and perception. The guardian of shadows instilled in Arim the specter of non-existence, the profound fear that the breath of life was merely a temporary loan, destined to be revoked. In his moments of rest, Arim saw in his nightmares the terrifying image of clay crumbling, his form returning to inert dust, and the certainty that all his learning would be in vain. Karun fueled this anguish, whispering, "You are made of nothing, and to nothing you shall return. Your faith in Ayel is an illusion that the next rain will dispel." The antagonist's skepticism was the weapon that wounded Arim's soul, demanding from him not only physical strength, but an unwavering faith in a design he could not even glimpse. It was the first and crucial test of faith, the choice between the certainty of disintegration and the invisible promise of eternity. In that season of drought and soul-crushing mourning, Arim's faith did not waver as Karun had expected, but became a hard mineral, forged in the furnace of solitude. With each whisper of doubt, he turned to the only point of certainty that remained to him, the memory of Ayel's pure intention as she breathed upon his clay face. If the Creator had dedicated such energy to his being, it could not be merely for the ephemeral. The divine purpose began to manifest itself in small glimpses, not through voices or thunder, but in the silent resilience of the matter that composed him. He realized that clay, though fragile, possessed the capacity to retain its form against the erosive action of wind and time, provided there was a greater will to sustain it. This was his first revelation of the divine purpose. He had not been created to be immortal in himself, but to be the vehicle of persistence, proof that fragility can be a vessel for transcendent strength. Time, still a fluid idea in the genesis of the world, passed while Arim, wandered through the wildest niches of creation, searching for a tangible sign. It was then that he understood that Ayel's protection would not be a wall, but an intrinsic covenant. The promise was engraved not in the stones, but in the very structure of his existence. The Creator had not abandoned him. He had given him the freedom to choose faith, and that choice in itself was the shield against treachery. Arim stopped by the bank of the river where Nalu flowed, and in an act of profound humility and acceptance he bowed, allowing the water to purify the dust and fear that Karun had tried to instill. At that instant, the clay of his body seemed to become denser, the fine dust of vulnerability transformed into a firmer consistency. He was no longer just the man of clay, but the symbol of obedience, the one who chose the invisible promise over the evidence of fear. Karun, sensing the growing firmness in Arim's soul, saw his skepticism and malice transform into a thunderous fury. He expected a swift collapse, the dissolution of the clay by fear, but he encountered unexpected resistance. "The Creator's illusion is stronger than I thought," hissed the Guardian of Shadows, and his wrath manifested in a literal storm, an attempt to use the forces of nature to undo what he had failed to achieve with mental manipulation. Cutting winds swept through the valley, and a torrential rain, driven by the intent to destroy, threatened to dissolve Arim into a shapeless mud. This was the moment of imminent triumph, for Arim did not flee. On his knees on the ground that had given him birth, he closed his eyes, not begging for an external miracle, but activating the strength that obedience had forged within him. Loyalty became his anchor. The contrast between before and after the ordeal was vividly manifested. Before, Arim was a hesitant being, his skin revealing the fragility of clay, susceptible to every touch and every harsh weather. Now, immersed in the fury of the storm, unleashed by Karun, a silent metamorphosis occurred. The water, which should have dissolved him, acted as a catalyst. The impurities and seeds of doubt embedded in his clay were washed away, and the heat of unwavering faith, kindled by Ayel's will, began to bake and harden his substance. At the end of the storm, when Karun recoiled in shock at his ineffectiveness, Arim rose. His skin was no longer soft clay, but a smooth, strong ceramic, with veins that shone like threads of pure gold. He had become resilient, the triumph of fidelity, living proof that the most fragile form, when sustained by faith, can transcend matter itself. The clayman was now the ceramic man. Arim's transformation was not merely physical, it was an act of profound redemption of matter. He who once felt the overwhelming vulnerability of his first being now radiated the serene unbreakability of one who had endured the fiery trial of existence. The vestiges of Karun's malice, which had attempted to instill the fear of disintegration, had been expelled with the storm's water, leaving in their place an undeniable clarity of purpose. The triumph did not lie in having destroyed the antagonist, but in having become indestructible by his methods. Arim understood that the legacy Ayel desired for him was not one of power, but of presence, to be the starting point of resistance, the eternal witness that faith, even in the absence of evidence, seals the divine promise. His new ceramic being was a silent prophecy for all future generations that would be forged in the pain of trial. Karun, the Guardian of Shadows, watched the scene from his refuge, and shock paralyzed his fury. He had used the arsenal of nature and doubt, and both had failed. The sight of Arim, now a figure of soft glow and unalterable form, caused him a mixture of frustrated skepticism and a glimpse of terror. What for Karun was merely a failed experiment, by Ayel had become a manifestation of power that defied the very law of entropy he so revered. The Guardian saw the error of his calculation. He had underestimated the weight of intention behind the breath. His regret was not of compassion, but of strategy, the painful realization that he had failed to stop the advance of life's chaos. Arim's former self lay like an empty shell, and the new being was an inevitable fulfillment of the Creator's promise. Seasons passed, and divine justice began to unfold in a way Arim could never have imagined. The triumph of his faith not only transformed him, but began to alter the very atmosphere of the primordial valley. Where Karun's shadows once clung to the landscape, now a soft, persistent light seemed to inhabit every particle of air. Ayel, the Creator, did not need to intervene with a resounding punishment. Arim's mere victorious existence was his judgment. The Guardian of Shadows realized that his own essence of negation was being subtly eradicated by the radiant positivity of faithfulness. His function of Testing the limits of creation had been fulfilled, but the result was not what he expected. Instead of annulment, he had catalyzed fortification. Redemption was not for Arim, who was already saved by faith, but for matter itself, which proved capable of sustaining the spirit. The legacy of Arim transcended its own journey. He did not become a god, nor a tyrant, but the foundation, the rock that proved that trial is merely the intermediate step towards glory. The Potterman now walked no longer as an isolated being, but as the point of connection between Ayel and the growing world. His figure, solid and imposing, became the model for all that would be built. Hope incarnate. The prophecy was complete. The being made of the humblest of materials overcame the highest of adversities through the simple yet powerful virtue of belief. His epic tale, narrated by the wind and the waters of Nalu, became the canon of perseverance. Reverence hung over the valley, and the satisfaction of the outcome was the silent jubilation of justice achieved. Ayel had triumphed through the faithfulness of his most fragile creation, and Karun had been silenced by the irrefutable evidence of redemption. The brilliance of Arim's ceramic form was an eloquent contrast to the darkness that Karun still tried to maintain on the fringes of the world. The transformation had instituted a new law in creation. The malleability of the initial matter gave way to the immutability of proven faith. This new Arim did not carry the arrogance of victory, but the profound humility of one who understood that his strength was not his own, but a divine loan eternalized by obedience. He walked with the dignity of a monolith, and each step was a silent negation of Karun's skepticism. The antagonist, in his strategic retreat to the depths, felt the pressure of the new reality. His malice was now only a weak echo against the thunder of manifest faith. The contrast was overwhelming. On one side, the soft clay, vulnerable and full of fear. On the other, the golden ceramic, resilient and full of purpose. The Eternal One had other plans that transcended Arim's mere survival. Ayel wished to establish a principle that the strongest is not the one who never falls, but the one who rises transformed. The saga of the Man of Clay was not the end of a story, but the genesis of a legacy. The Creator used Arim's ordeal to encode hope into the DNA of the nascent universe. What seemed like abandonment was, in fact, the highest trust, permission for Arim to find the divinity within himself activated by the test. The depth of this justice was that the victim became the moral executioner of his oppressor, not through retaliation, but through the simple and pure manifestation of fidelity. The initial indignation at Arim's fragility now transformed into a solemn reverence for his unbreakability, the inevitable triumph of the promise. Years passed, or what in the chronology of Genesis could be called time, and Arim dedicated his new existence to understanding the designs of the molder. He no longer feared dissolution, for he knew that his ceramic body was a seal of eternity. His motivation became that of a guardian of the promise, a guiding beacon for future beings who would be made not from primordial dust, but from his own fortified substance. The initial solitude dissipated, replaced by the companionship of certainty. Where before there was the murmur of doubt, now there was the calm voice of conviction, echoing the truth that weakness, when surrendered to faith, becomes the foundation of the greatest strength. Arim's transformation was tangible proof that triumph is not a single event, but a continuous state of fidelity to origin. Karun, secluded in his darkness, tried to rationalize his defeat. He argued with himself that Arim's resistance was a cosmic accident, an exception proving the rule of life's imperfection. But in his moments of forced honesty, he felt the cold terror of the truth. His fundamental denial of the goodness of creation was being dismantled brick by Arim's mere presence. His malice transformed into impotent bitterness. His punishment was not the fire of heaven, but the obligation to witness the success of that which he most despised. Karun's shock was the recognition that his role in the drama of creation was not that of destroyer, but of catalyst. He had, unintentionally, helped forge the first and most eloquent example of redemption through faith, raising the moral of the story to a pinnacle of unbreakable hope. The contrast between the life Arim lived and the memory of his initial ordeal was the very essence of the epic. He remembered the sensation of the soft clay yielding under pressure, the cold water of the Nalu River mingling with the tears of his anguish, and the bitter taste of fear instilled by Karun's shadow. Now, the sun reflected on his polished surface, and he felt the lightness of a being who no longer feared erosion but defied it. His journey became the legend told by the very cosmos, chaos in formation. The narrative of his initial humiliation served to underscore the magnitude of his ascension. The pain of loneliness and apparent abandonment was the price paid for the glory of being the first to experience divine justice in life. He was not merely a survivor, he was the herald of the promise. The guardian of shadows, seeing that brute force and subtle doubt had failed, decided to use the weapon of distraction and false comfort, hoping that Arim would forget the purpose of his transformation. Karun tried to seduce him with the vision of excessive power, whispering that his new ceramic form should be used to dominate the world, not to serve it. The temptation was subtle, to use the blessing for ambition, exchanging loyalty for despotism. But Arim, having been forged in the fire of pure faith, saw the malice behind the mirage. His heart, now a core of unwavering conviction, repelled the suggestion with the same force with which it had withstood the storm. The test of faith was renewed, now not as fear, but as seduction. Each day, Arim learned to shape his new existence. He understood that his triumph did not absolve him of responsibility, but rather magnified it. The divine purpose deepened into a legacy mission. Arim should not only be an example of overcoming, but an instructor of persistence. He began to interact with the elements, using the solidity of his form to trace the first stable paths on the still formless earth. His presence made the environment safe, a counterpoint to the unpredictability of the chaos that Karun represented. The alliance with Ayel was expressed not in words, but in acts of transformation, where his unbreakable form served as the first anchor of order in the universe. His life was a historical chronicle, where each day was a new paragraph in the epic tale of redemption. The climax of his epic was not a physical confrontation, but the total and inevitable acceptance of his destiny. Arim understood that the ordeal was not a punishment, but the rite of passage to his true form. By accepting his role as a landmark and model, he achieved the fullness of the triumph of fidelity. The feeling of divine justice was not vengeance, but the re-establishment of truth. Ayel's love, even if incomprehensible in its methodology, was undeniable in its result. Karun, witnessing Arim's ascension to his ultimate purpose, felt the weight of absolute defeat. His philosophy of skepticism and denial was irremediably refuted by the vivid reality of the Man of Clay. The saga of the Man of Clay ended not with the annihilation of one of the parties, but with the dramatic elevation of faith to a level of eternal unbreakability, causing reverence throughout creation. The epic of Arim, now complete in its first phase, resonated through creation like a symphony of overcoming. If you're enjoying this story, take a second. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's continue with this exciting adventure. Once bent under the weight of the fragility of the clay was now vertical, a pillar of conviction. His transformation was the purest fulfillment of the prophecy inherent in the breath of Ayel. What is weak can be strengthened by the Spirit. He did not become a being of ethereal light, but maintained the materiality of the earth, proving that holiness can reside in the humblest substance, provided it is purified by the fire of trial. This vivid and contrasting reality, the abysmal difference between vulnerable clay and unbreakable ceramic, was the most dramatic lesson of the entire saga, elevating the moral of the story beyond time. Redemption was not an isolated event, but a continuous evolution. Arim, freed from the shackles of fear, dedicated himself to creating an atmosphere of safety for future life forms. He used his newfound solidity to shape the earth in a beneficial way, creating refuges and indicating sources of clean water, following Nalu's whispers. The contrast between his humble origins and his glorious destiny was the manifestation of a higher will. His story was a tale of divine justice that did not merely punish evil, but glorified perseverance. The satisfaction the reader would feel in following the account was the cosmic satisfaction of seeing fragility crowned with strength and malice silenced by the evidence of goodness. Karun's skepticism, once a sharp weapon, had become an anchor of frustration. The Guardian of Shadows understood that his defeat was irreversible, for Arim had established an irrefutable precedent. Arim's pain and unwavering faith, which he had tried so hard to break, only served to cement his form. Karun, in his despair, attempted one last tactic, to devalue the triumph, claiming that Ayel's intervention had made victory inevitable and therefore without merit. However, the omnipresent narrator knew and revealed, Ayel only provided the potential. It was Arim's free and unbreakable choice to persist in faith that catalyzed the alchemy of clay. into pottery. Arim's legacy is not static. He becomes the silent guardian of the memory of origin. He is proof that the humility of creation is not a mistake, but an opportunity for spiritual triumph. He represents Ayel's covenant with matter, the pact that no trial is greater than the promise of transformation. His tale, told with the eloquence of an ancient saga, immerses the audience in a vivid visualization of before and after. From a being who felt abandoned and dissolvable, Arim transformed into a monument of fidelity, a living chronicle that inspires connection with the higher power. His life is the ultimate revelation of divine purpose. The purpose of all creation is to be tested to reach its most resilient version. In the vastness of the saga, the focus remains on the transformation of Arim's soul, refined under the pressure of adversity. What was initially a spark of life mixed with dust became a beacon of determination. The cruel and relentless ordeal served as the chisel that removed the rough edges of doubt and insecurity, revealing the perfect form that Ayel had conceived from the beginning. He was the personification of obedience that transforms into majesty. His journey, recounted with the solemnity of an epic chronicler, emphasizes that the greatest battle is not against the external forces of Karun, but against the inner fear of not being worthy of the promise. Arim overcame this fear, and therein lay his deepest triumph, the supreme act of redemption. With each sunrise that bathed the pottery man, Karun felt the weight of his own impotence. The guardian of shadows, accustomed to seeing fragility yield, was now confronted with the anomaly of a force that fed on what should have been its ruin. His malice transformed into a somber sadness, the realization that he was merely the unwitting instrument of Arim's glory. Karun lamented the loss of his former order, in which clay and dust were mere cosmic residues. The clash of antagonists was a silent drama. While Arim radiated the peace of certainty, Karun agonized in the uncertainty of his own purpose before such unwavering faith. The narrative doesn't delve into technical details, but focuses on the progression of faith and destiny. Arim's body, now a composite of hardened clay and inner light, was the embodiment of the covenant. He needed no stone tablets or oaths. The promise was inscribed in his very substance. His initial solitude was replaced by the invisible companionship of divine design. His before and after was a silent sermon. Before, the desperate search for purpose. After, the repose in the certainty of his calling. His presence elevated the morale of creation, instilling the conviction that suffering is merely the crucible that refines the soul. The triumph of Arim's faithfulness was the inevitable fulfillment, the logical conclusion of the prologue written by the breath of Ayel. The narrative reaches its climax not with a war cry, but with the quietude of an absolute victory. The tale of Arim, the symbol of obedience, would become the basis for all sagas of overcoming. He is the first fulfilled prophecy, the man who proved that the Creator's love is a fire that does not destroy, but cooks and strengthens. The indignation at his initial trial was now eclipsed by the solemn satisfaction of divine justice. The Potterman was complete, an eternal landmark of overcoming through faith. Arim's life was now an ode to persistence. He had crossed the valley of humiliation, where clay yielded to doubt, to the plateau of unbreakability, where pottery upheld the promise. The solemn narrator emphasizes that the initial pain was not without purpose. Each tear and each moment of anguish served as the additive that bound his new form. His account is captivating because it reveals the majesty of divine intervention, manifested not through an external miracle, but through the empowerment of the fragile. Ayel did not spare him from the trial, but provided him with the strength to overcome it, a manifestation of love deeper than mere exemption from suffering. The guardian of shadows could no longer approach. The radiance of Arim's faith acted as an insurmountable barrier. Karun, the skeptic, saw in Arim his most spectacular failure. He tried to justify his defeat, claiming that the pottery man was no longer the clay man he had set out to test, but a new creation. But the omnipresent narrator unmasks this evasion. The new form was the inevitable maturation of the old form, the direct result of the pressure of the test. Karun's shock was the shock of denial in the face of the evidence of redemption, the recognition that Arim's initial fragility was, in fact, his greatest weapon. The chronology of Arim's overcoming was a manifestation of the higher will. The phrase, "in that season of drought and mourning," represents the period of introspection and pain that preceded the hardening, and the phrase, "the eternal had." Other plans symbolizes the turning point in destiny that transformed the threat of dissolution into a seal of eternity. Arim did not seek victory, he sought faithfulness, and victory followed him like a shadow. The focus on the journey of spiritual transformation revelation highlights that physical triumph was merely the externalization of an inner victory where confidence supplanted doubt. Arim's legacy would become a beacon, a prophecy for those who would be created afterward. He proved that the destiny of creation is not a return to dust, but ascension to the highest form of resilience. The Potter Man, with his shimmering golden veins, was the embodiment of divine justice. Karun's malice had been used to strengthen and perpetuate what he intended to destroy. His story elevates the narrative to an epic of unbreakability, where reverence for faith and satisfaction for the victory of obedience merge into an inevitable and glorious ending. Redemption is not a gift, but the crown of perseverance. The solemn narrative now delves into the contemplation of the transformed Arim. He was no longer the being who needed Nalu to name and direct him, but the one who could advise the rivers to maintain the course of life. The before and after is dramatic and vivid. The once hesitant touch of one who feared falling apart was now firm and secure, capable of shaping and stabilizing. His posture expressed a peace that can only be achieved by those who have faced the totality of their own vulnerability and overcome it through faith. Aiel, in his silent wisdom, had used Karun's threat like a potter's fire, and the most basic material had become a masterpiece of unbreakability, elevating the drama without losing focus on the narrative of redemption. Karun's malice did not disappear, but was reduced to an irrelevant murmur. He became the eternal observer of the triumph he himself helped to forge. His punishment was his eternal reminder of the inevitability of Aiel's promise, a form of divine justice that is not cruel, but infinitely didactic. The antagonist's shock was not only from the loss, but from the profound and disturbing feeling that he had been manipulated by a design he could not comprehend. His original skepticism transformed into a bitter recognition that Arim's faith was the only variable he had failed to account for. The ceramic man, in his new existence, was the embodiment of the revelation of divine purpose. He understood that he was not the sole objective of Aiel, but the prototype, the first of many to undergo the ordeal and achieve resilience. His legacy was not one of isolation, but of foundation. His story, told with eloquence and ancestral vocabulary, invites the reader to immerse themselves in the atmosphere of overcoming, visualizing the transformation of dust into glory. The initial solitude became the foundation for communion with the greater purpose, and his body, once fragile, was now the first physical epic in the history of creation. Each day, the contrast between Arim's original frailty and ultimate strength intensified, ensuring that triumph seemed an inevitable fulfillment. His journey is the chronicle of a successful test. The transformation was not merely a change of state, but a moral elevation, proving that apparent abandonment is sometimes the greatest opportunity for the growth of faith. The account is melodramatic and solemn, fulfilling the purpose of causing indignation at the injustice of the ordeal and profound satisfaction at the victory of faithfulness. Arim, the first being, was now the first monument to the unbreakability of faith. The triumph of fidelity, forged in the fire of trial, was not an end, but the beginning of a new form of existence for Arim. He understood that his covenant with Aiel was eternal in nature, and that his ceramic body was the visible manifestation of an unbreakable pact. The epic narrator underlines the importance of this moment. Arim was no longer driven by the need for survival, but by the fullness of a revealed purpose. His life was the first proof that matter, when infused with faith, can resist the forces of entropy and negation that Karun tried to impose. His transformation is the turning point in Genesis, the moment when hope becomes palpable. Karun, the guardian of shadows, found himself imprisoned in his own bitterness, a victim of his own skepticism. His malicious intent to undo Aiel's creation had been subverted and used to perpetuate it. His harshest punishment was not a lightning bolt from the sky, but the necessity of existing in the same reality as Arim, witnessing the blossoming of life from resilience. The antagonist's shock was the epitome of divine justice. The punishment of evil is not its annihilation, but its transformation into a tool in service of the greater good. Karun's regret was that of a being who failed to comprehend the depth of the Creator's love and patience. With each cycle of time in the nascent world, Arim reaffirmed his legacy. He held no grudges, for his faith had consumed all bitterness. His story was a lesson that redemption is not the negation of the past, but its overcoming. The before and after were the essential contrast of the saga. The first Arim was the question. The Arim of pottery was the answer. The account, free of irrelevant dialogues and focused on the acts of spiritual transformation, was a historical chronicle of the evolution of consciousness and form. He, the man of pottery, was the first to connect earthly fragility to celestial glory. The triumph of Arim's faithfulness resonated with the prophecy that faith overcomes adversity and life is more resilient than chaos. He had reached the point of no return on his spiritual journey. His unbreakable form was a reminder that Ayel's purpose was the perpetuation of life in its most glorious form. The account evokes the expected reverence, indignation at the trial overcome, and profound satisfaction at the victory of obedience. The Potter Man, the herald of redemption, was the eloquent witness to truth, a story of overcoming that would become the fundamental myth of perseverance for all creation. The story of Arim has become an epic tale of overcoming through obedience. His transformation from unstable clay into golden pottery was not accidental, but the culmination of a conscious choice to maintain faith in Ayel's design, even when all evidence pointed to abandonment. The solemn narrator uses this duality to accentuate the drama. Arim's initial fragility was proof that faith must be activated in the absence of guarantees. His journey is a model for all souls to come, showing that true strength lies in the ability to accept trial as a process of refinement, not as punishment. The manifestation of divine justice did not come through the destruction of Karun, but through his complete deprivation of power. The Guardian of Shadows, with his malice and skepticism, was relegated to the condition of a shadow, powerless before the light emanating from Arim's unbreakable nature. He was forced to witness the legacy, the success of the life he so despised. This was the cruelest and, at the same time, the most just of punishments, to see the triumph of faith through his own unbelieving eyes. Karun's shock was the recognition that the most powerful force in the cosmos was not negation, but fidelity. Time, measured by the transformations in the Valley of Arim, advanced. The Potter's Man felt no need to withdraw, but to become the stable center of the world in formation. His primordial solitude gave way to a fullness of purpose. He became the catalyst of life, the starting point for the creation of other beings, no longer made of vulnerable clay, but of the substance of hope and resilience. His triumph was not a singular event, but a perennial source of inspiration, a vivid reminder that redemption is the ability to rewrite one's own destiny through unwavering faith. The epic tale of Arim fulfills its purpose of elevating the moral of the story. His life is the most eloquent prophecy that trial is the seal that eternalizes the covenant. The contrast between initial pain and final glory is so dramatic that it guarantees the reader's total involvement, allowing them to visualize the before and after and feel the turning point of destiny guided by a higher will. The Potter Man is a testament to fidelity, living proof that the breath of Ayel always carries the promise of inevitable triumph. His saga is a hymn to perseverance and a monument to divine justice that transforms fragility into eternal strength. The spiritual climax of Arim's saga lies in his profound acceptance of the role of foundation. He, the first, understood that his existence was not only about himself, but about paving the way for faith. The solemn narrator describes the final transformation. Arim no longer seeks Ayel's approval, for he has become the approval, the living evidence that the divine plan was viable. His pottery, now perfectly polished, reflected the light of creation, banishing the last shadows of doubt that Karun had tried to infiltrate. His journey is the ultimate expression of redemption, where the subject of humiliation becomes the object of reverence, a total triumph over adversity. Karun's perspective, the eternal skeptic, was irrevocably altered. He could no longer see Arim as a mistake, but as a mystery that challenged his philosophy of denial. The Guardian of Shadows felt the shock of the revelation. He had been the necessary instrument for Ayel to prove the strength of faith. His regret was not moral, but existential, the pain of a being who failed to understand the intention behind creation. The melodramatic narrator underscores the irony of divine justice. Malice becomes the fire that cooks faith, and the antagonist is forced to be the unwitting chronicler of his rival's glory. Arim, the ceramic pillar, remained. His body was the sanctuary of the memory of trial and the temple of the fulfilled promise. He became the point of reference in the vastness, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos of nascent creation. His story is the legacy. Temporary suffering is the key to eternal glory. The turning point of destiny was so complete that the man of clay, born of fragility, taught the earth itself about unbreakability. His life was an epic tale, a historical chronicle of transformation that inspired Connection with divine purpose. The narrative concludes with the solemn satisfaction of the victory of faith. Arim's triumph is proof that fidelity is the only substance capable of transcending mortality. He is no longer the Arim who feared the wind and rain, but the guiding light of the cosmos. His saga, narrated with eloquence and dramatic focus, is the definitive revelation of divine purpose. Adversity is not an end, but the means by which fragility rises to unbreakability, and faith manifests itself in its most glorious form. Reverend, do you want more Bible stories filled with faith, teachings, and heartwarming moments? Subscribe and turn on notifications to follow us with each new story.